What happens when the perfect marriage is a perfect lie. Saraphina Sterling, heiress to $1 billion fortune and 7 months pregnant, vanishes without a trace from her New York City penthouse. Her husband, the charismatic tech billionaire Damien Thorne, pleads for her return on national television. But behind the scenes, he's not searching for his wife. He's plotting to have her declared dead, steal her inheritance, and replace her with his beautiful, ambitious mistress. He thought he had the perfect plan. He thought she was gone forever. He never imagined that the woman he left for dead was watching his every move, waiting for the perfect moment to reclaim her life, her fortune, and her revenge. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was always precisely 72 degrees, a climate-controlled perfection that mirrored the life of its inhabitants. It was a world of hushed elegance, of thick pile carpets that absorbed every sound, of floor-to-ceiling windows that presented New York City as a glittering, silent snow globe. For Saraphina Sterling Thorne, this gilded cage had begun to feel more like a prison. At 28, Saraphina possessed a quiet grace that often belied the immense power she wielded. She was the sole heiress to the sterling consolidated fortune, an old money empire built on global shipping and strategic real estate. Her grandfather, a formidable titan of industry named Charles Sterling, had protected his legacy with an ironclad trust. The principal was untouchable, but its vast annual profits belonged to Saraphina, and upon the birth of her first child, a significant portion of the trust's control would pass to her. It was a clause designed to ensure the continuation of the Sterling bloodline. It had also, she was beginning to fear, made her a target. Her husband, Damien Thorne, was a different breed of predator. He was new money, a tech billionaire who had clawed his way to the top with a brilliant mind and a ruthless ambition that captivated Wall Street. He was handsome, charming, and publicly doted on his pregnant wife. His company, Thorne Industries, was a behemoth in the world of artificial intelligence, but it was heavily leveraged, built on a mountain of debt and investor confidence that required constant feeding. He called Saraphina his angel, his calm in the storm. Lately, his touch felt less like an embrace and more like an appraisal. The signs were small at first, almost imperceptible. A new executive assistant, a stunning brunette named Isabella Rossi, with eyes that held a flinty intelligence and a complete lack of deference. Isabella was always there, lingering after meetings, her perfume a cloying presence in Damien's study. Then came the hushed phone calls Damien would take on the terrace, his back to the glass, his voice a low, urgent murmur that the wind snatched away. He started questioning her about the trust, not in an overt, greedy way, but with a surgeon's precision couched in conversations about securing their future and protecting their child. It's just that the stipulations are so archaic, darling, he'd said one evening, swirling a glass of Macallan 25. He rarely drank, but had taken to it recently. What if something were to happen? The board of trustees are old friends of your grandfather. They don't know me. They don't understand the agility our family needs in the modern market. Saraphina, her hand resting protectively on the gentle swell of her belly, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the apartment's temperature. My grandfather built that trust to protect the family from the market, Damien, not to be used by it. His smile was a masterpiece of control, a perfect arrangement of teeth and lips that didn't reach his cold grey eyes. Of course, my love. I just worry about you. About us. The worry escalated a week later. Dr. Evelyn Reed Seraphina's obstetrician had called with a concerned tone. Saraphina, your latest blood work showed some anomalies. Your iron levels are surprisingly low, and there are trace elements of something we can't identify. Have you been taking any supplements or herbal teas I don't know about? No, nothing. Saraphina had replied, confused. Just the prenatals you prescribed. Damien has been making me a special protein shake every morning, she added an afterthought. He says it's packed with nutrients for the baby. A silence hung on the line. Saraphina, Dr. Reed said carefully. I want you to stop drinking those shakes immediately, and I'm sending a courier to your home to pick up a sample of the protein powder. I'd like to have it analyzed independently. Do not tell your husband about this. The seed of fear planted months ago began to sprout into a terrifying tree of possibilities. Damien, the man she had loved, the father of her unborn child, was he capable of such a monstrous betrayal? The thought was so vile, so unthinkable, that she almost dismissed it. But she couldn't dismiss the coldness in his eyes, the sudden appearance of Isabella Rossi, the persistent questions about her inheritance. The sterling fortune was a powerful motivator, and the baby, her precious unborn child, was the key. That evening, the air in the penthouse was thick with unspoken tension. Damien was exceptionally attentive, drawing her a bath, massaging her swollen ankles. His every touch felt like a lie. You seem tired, darling, he whispered, his lips against her hair. Why don't you have an early night? I have a late-night conference call with the Tokyo office. I'll be in my study. I think I will, she said, her voice a fragile whisper. She feigned sleep, her heart hammering against her ribs. She waited until she heard the soft click of his study door closing. Then she moved. Her hands trembled as she packed a small duffel bag, a burner phone she'd bought for cash weeks ago. Bundles of emergency money she had been slowly siphoning from her personal accounts, a hard drive containing copies of her financial records, and the trust documents, and the small container of protein powder she had swapped out with a generic brand hiding the original for Dr. Reed's courier. Her escape plan, once a paranoid fantasy, was now her only lifeline. Her family had a private security consultant, a man named Julian Croft, a former MI6 agent who was discreet, efficient, and fiercely loyal to the sterling name. Months ago, during a moment of profound unease, she had met with him secretly. If you ever feel you're in a gilded cage and the door is closing it, he had told her, you don't rattle the bars. You find the hidden hinge. Call this number. Say the words, "The Winter Canary is flying south." A car will be waiting for you at the service exit of the building across the street in 90 minutes. It will take you to a safe location. No questions asked until you are ready. With tears streaming down her face, she looked around the opulent bedroom one last time. It was a beautiful room, a beautiful home, a beautiful lie. She slipped out the service entrance of the apartment, a ghost in her own home, and took the staff elevator down to the garage. She didn't take her custom Rolls-Royce, but instead slipped into the shadows of the street, her heart a frantic drum against the silence of the night. Across the street, she pulled out the burner phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed the number. A calm British voice answered on the first ring. Yes, the Winter Canary is flying south, she whispered, her voice cracking. Acknowledged. 90 minutes. Stay out of sight. The line went dead. Saraphina Sterling Thorne, the pregnant billionaire heiress, melted into the indifferent anonymity of the New York City night. She wasn't just running from her husband. She was running for her life and the life of her child. Back in the penthouse, Damien Thorne finished his conference call, a brief, triumphant conversation with Isabella, and walked to the bedroom. He expected to find his wife sleeping soundly, the subtle poison in her system continuing its slow, insidious work. Instead, he found an empty bed. A faint, cold breeze drifted in from a balcony door, left slightly ajar. Panic for a fleeting moment seized him, but it was not the panic of a worried husband. It was the fury of a predator whose prey had just escaped the trap. For the first 48 hours, Damien Thorne played the part of the distraught husband with chilling perfection. He contacted the NYPD, his voice thick with manufactured panic. He gave a tearful press conference on the steps of their building, his face a mask of anguish, his hand clutching one of Saraphina's cashmere scarves. "My wife, my pregnant wife, is missing." He choked out, the cameras flashing, capturing every nuance of his performance. "She is my entire world. Our baby is our future. If anyone has seen anything, please, I'm begging you, bring my Saraphina home." The public narrative was set a tragic, mysterious disappearance. The beautiful pregnant heiress, perhaps overwhelmed by hormones or stress, had wandered off. Or worse, she had been the victim of a kidnapping, a crime targeting their immense wealth. But behind the locked doors of his study, the mask came off. The performance ended, replaced by a cold reptilian focus. With him was Isabella Rossi, no longer the deferential assistant, but an equal partner in conspiracy. She moved with a feline grace, her sharp mind as intoxicating to Damien as her physical beauty. "The police are useless," Damien spat, pacing the floor where his wife had walked just 2 nights before. "They're checking hospitals, airports, talking to her vapid friends. They're looking for a victim, not a fugitive." "It's better this way," Isabella said, her voice a low purr. She was perched on the edge of his mahogany desk, a glass of champagne in her hand. "A victim garners sympathy. A fugitive raises questions. Right now you are the grieving husband. We need to maintain that image. And the trust," he pressed his primary concern. "Her disappearance complicates the everything. The clause requires a living heir. If she's just missing, the trustees will freeze everything. Charles Sterling's old guard, Arthur Hemlock, and his cronies, they'll lock it down so tightly I won't be able to touch a dime." Arthur Hemlock was the Sterling family's chief legal counsel, a man in his late 70s with a mind like a steel trap and an unwavering loyalty to the memory of Charles Sterling. Damien knew Hemlock despised him, viewing him as a vulgar upstart who had married into a legacy he didn't deserve. "Then we accelerate the timeline," Isabella said simply. She stood up and walked over to him, tracing a finger down his chest. "We can't wait the standard 7 years to have her declared legally dead. We need to create a scenario so tragic, so final, that no one could possibly believe she's alive. A body is messy and invites forensic questions. But a devastating accident." Her eyes glittered with a dark brilliance. "Her car, the Rolls-Royce, is still in the garage. What if she wasn't kidnapped from the street? What if in a state of distress, she drove upstate to the old Sterling lake house, and what if her car tragically veered off that treacherous cliff road on Route 22? A fiery crash, a wreck so complete that recovery would be impossible." Damien stared at her, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It was brilliant. It was clean. It created a definitive end to the story of Saraphina Sterling, allowing the story of Damien Thorne, tragic widower and sole guardian of their lost child's legacy, to begin. The plan was set in motion with ruthless efficiency. One of Damien's less scrupulous security men, a man indebted to him for covering up a violent past, was dispatched to the Sterling's remote garage upstate. The man a ghost on the payroll drove Saraphina's Rolls-Royce to a notoriously dangerous bend in the road overlooking the Hudson River. Using accelerants, he staged a horrific crash, sending the vehicle plummeting down the cliff face where it exploded into a fireball against the rocks below. He planted a piece of her jewelry, a distinctive Cartier bracelet Damien had given her for their anniversary nearby for the police to find. The news broke like a thunderclap. Billionaire heiress, Saraphina Sterling, presumed dead in fiery crash. Damien's second press conference was a masterclass in feigned devastation. He collapsed into Isabella's arms, now officially presented as his pillar of support as the world watched. The sympathy was immense, the narrative cemented. With the stage set, Damien made his move. He petitioned the surrogate's court, citing the extraordinary circumstances and the overwhelming evidence of her death. His lawyers, a high-priced team from a firm known for its aggressive tactics, argued that for the stability of Thorn Industries and the management of the vast Sterling-Thorn joint assets, a presumptive death certificate was urgently required. They argued that Damien, as the grieving husband and father-to-be, was the natural and only choice to assume control. His first meeting with Arthur Hemlock and the Sterling Trust Board was a declaration of war. The boardroom on the 50th floor of the Sterling Tower was old-world elegance, dark wood leather chairs, and portraits of past Sterling generations staring down with silent judgment. Mr. Thorn, Hemlock began, his voice dry as parchment, we offer our deepest, most sincere condolences for your tragic loss. Thank you, Arthur, Damien said, his tone oozing a practiced humility. It has been an unimaginable ordeal. Indeed, Hemlock continued, his eyes unwavering. However, the Sterling Trust is not a conventional asset. It is a legacy. Charles Sterling's instructions were explicit and designed to withstand any eventuality. He slid a leather-bound document across the vast table. According to Article 4, Section 7, in the event of Lady Saraphina's death before the birth of a living heir, control of the Trust's capital management reverts entirely to this board. Her personal profit disbursements, of course, cease. The entire mechanism goes into a state of protective hibernation until a future Sterling heir, as defined by the original charter, comes of age. Damien's blood ran cold. That's absurd. The child was viable. We were weeks away. In the eyes of God and the law, I am the father of a Sterling heir. You are the father of a tragically lost fetus, Mr. Thorn, Hemlock corrected him, the words like chips of ice. Not a living heir, as defined by the trust. The charter is quite clear. A birth certificate is required. A living, breathing child. Without that, you have no claim. The Sterling legacy is secure. Damien felt a surge of pure rage. The old man had outmaneuvered him. He had the public sympathy, the death certificate, the perfect story. But he couldn't touch the real prize. The billion-dollar core of the Sterling Empire was locked away from him. This is an insult, Damien hissed, dropping the facade. An insult to my wife's memory. On the contrary, Hemlock said, rising slowly to his feet, a towering, frail figure of immense authority. This is the highest honor to her memory. It is the execution of her grandfather's will, which was designed explicitly to protect his bloodline and his fortune from opportunistic predators. We will, of course, continue to manage the assets prudently. You will be sent an annual report. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a great deal of work to do. Damien stormed out of the boardroom, his face a thunderous mask. Isabella was waiting for him in the car, her expression expectant. "It's the old man," Damien snarled, slamming the car door. "Hemlock. He's locked it down. He's citing some archaic clause about a living heir. Without the baby, I have no standing." Isabella was silent for a moment, her sharp mind processing the setback. "So the trust is sealed." "Like a tomb," he spat. "But not her personal assets," she asked. "The penthouse, the art collection, her stock portfolio outside the trust. They are still worth hundreds of millions." Damien's anger began to recede, replaced by calculation. "Yes, those are part of the joint marital estate. With the death certificate, I have control of those." Isabella smiled, a slow, sensual curve of her lips. "Then we start there. We bleed to the periphery. We liquidate what we can. We build our own war chest. $1 billion is a lovely prize, Damien, but a few $100 million is a very, very handsome consolation. And in the meantime," she added, moving closer to him, "it's time for the grieving widower to find comfort. It's time for me to step out of the shadows. The world needs to see that you're moving on, that you're strong." He looked at her, his partner in crime. The loss of the trust was a bitter pill, but she was right. The game wasn't over. It had just changed. He would drain every last dollar he could from Saraphina's personal wealth, merge it into his own empire, and solidify his power. He would move Isabella into the penthouse. He would make her the new Mrs. Thorne. He would erase every trace of the wife he had tried to destroy. He believed Saraphina Sterling was ash and memory. He had no idea she was a gathering storm waiting to strike. While Damien Thorne was busy orchestrating his wife's public death, the real Saraphina Sterling was being reborn in anonymity. The car arranged by Julian Croft had spirited her away from the city, driving through the night to a secluded, unremarkable safe house in a quiet corner of Vermont. It was a simple 2-bedroom cottage, worlds away from the opulence of her former life. There were no original Rothkos on the walls, no staff to cater to her every need, just functional furniture, a well-stocked pantry, and most importantly, absolute security. For the first week, Saraphina did little more than sleep and eat. The adrenaline that had fueled her escape gave way to a bone-deep exhaustion and a tidal wave of grief. She wept for the life she had lost, the man she thought she had married, and the naive trust she had so foolishly given him. But every time she felt her baby kick, a quiet, fierce resolve hardened within her. This was no longer just about survival. It was about justice. Julian Croft arrived on the 8th day. He was a man in his 50s, with a lean, athletic build and watchful eyes that missed nothing. He moved with a quiet efficiency that was both calming and deeply serious. He didn't offer platitudes or hollow comforts. He brought a laptop, a satellite internet connection, and a plan. "He's declared you dead," Julian said, his voice neutral as he set up the equipment. "Staged a crash on Route 22. Your Rolls-Royce is a pile of scrap metal at the bottom of a cliff. The media has consumed the story whole. As far as the world is concerned, you are gone." Saraphina absorbed the news, her hand resting on her stomach. She had expected it, but the finality was still a blow. "And the trust?" "Secure," Julian said with a thin smile. "Arthur Hemlock has placed it in lockdown. Damien can't touch the principal. That was your grandfather's genius. The fortress is holding." "But he'll go after everything else," she said, her voice stronger now. "My personal accounts, the art, the properties held outside the trust. He already is." Julian confirmed. His lawyers are filing motions to consolidate the marital assets under his sole control, and Isabella Rossi has moved into the penthouse. A hot, white flash of anger cut through Saraphina's grief. The image of that woman in her home, sleeping in her bed, touching her things, was a profound violation. "Good," Saraphina said the word, startling both Julian and herself with its intensity. "Let him get comfortable. Let him think he's won. Let him get arrogant." This was the moment her fear finally transmuted into strategy. She was not the fragile, frightened woman who had fled New York. She was a sterling. Her grandfather hadn't just left her a fortune, he had taught her how to protect it. She had spent summers during college interning at the Sterling Foundation, learning about corporate structures, financial leverage, and the intricate dance of power and money. Damien had mistaken her gentle nature for weakness. He was about to learn how wrong he was. With Julian's help, she became a ghost in the machine. They established a new encrypted digital identity for her. She was no longer Saraphina Sterling Thorne. She was S. Winter, a phantom investor, a disembodied entity that existed only in the deep web of international finance. Her first call was to Arthur Hemlock. The old lawyer nearly wept with relief when he heard her voice. "My dear girl," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "We had feared the worst." "I'm safe, Arthur, and I'm pregnant," she said, cutting to the chase. "But for now, I need to remain dead." She laid out her situation, her suspicions about Damien's attempts to poison her, a fact later confirmed when Dr. Reed's analysis of the protein powder revealed trace amounts of a slow-acting, non-lethal substance designed to induce miscarriage and her narrow escape. "That monster," Hemlock breathed, his voice trembling with fury. "He will not get away with this, Saraphina. The full weight of the law." "No," Saraphina interrupted firmly. "The law is too slow, Arthur, and his lawyers are too good. He's insulated himself perfectly. A public accusation without irrefutable proof would be dismissed as the ravings of a hysterical woman, especially if I just reappeared from the dead. He would paint me as unstable. No, we are not going to fight him in a courtroom. We are going to fight him in the boardroom. We're going to dismantle him, piece by piece." The plan was audacious. Saraphina, through her new identity as S. Winter, and with Arthur Hemlock acting as her proxy, began to move. First, they used the vast, untouched resources of the Sterling Trust, not the principal, but the strategic influence it wielded. Hemlock began making quiet calls to the heads of banks that held Damien's corporate debt. He didn't make threats. He simply raised concerns about the instability at Thorne Industries following recent events. He spoke of fiduciary duty and risk assessment. Coming from the head of the Sterling Trust, these were not suggestions. They were warnings. Next, Julian Croft put his formidable intelligence-gathering skills to work. He delved into Damien's life, his business dealings, and most importantly, his mistress. Julian discovered that Isabella Rossi wasn't just a beautiful face. She had a history. Her real name was Isabella Rinaldi, and she had left a trail of ruined executives in her wake across Europe, a corporate chameleon who specialized in seducing powerful men and exploiting their weaknesses for financial gain. She had a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands, and Julian's surveillance suggested that she was not just Damien's lover, but was also secretly siphoning funds from the accounts he was liquidating. She was playing her own game. "She's his greatest weakness," Julian reported to Saraphina during one of their nightly encrypted calls. "He trusts her. He believes she is loyal to him, but she is loyal only to herself. She's his Achilles heel." Saraphina processed this information. Her war now had two fronts. As the weeks turned into a month, then too Saraphina's pregnancy advanced. Her days were a strange dichotomy. She lived a simple, quiet life, walking in the woods, preparing simple meals, feeling her baby grow, and at night she transformed into Winter, a ruthless corporate raider, directing a multi-pronged attack against the man who tried to kill her. She directed Hemlock to begin acquiring small strategic blocks of Thorn Industries stock through shell corporations, not enough to raise alarm, but enough to have a voice. She had Julian leak anonymous tips to dogged financial journalists about irregularities in Thorn Industries' recent SEC filings. Whispers began to circulate on Wall Street. Why was Damien Thorn liquidating his late wife's blue-chip assets and pouring the money into his own volatile tech company? Why were foreign banks suddenly reviewing their credit lines with him? Damien cocooned in his New York penthouse, with Isabella felt the ground subtly shifting beneath his feet, but couldn't identify the source of the tremors. He was too busy celebrating his victory, hosting lavish parties, and showcasing Isabella as his new partner. He was preparing to announce their engagement, the final step in erasing Saraphina's memory. In her quiet Vermont cottage, Saraphina read the society pages online, watching Damien and Isabella smile for the cameras in her home. The anger was a cold, hard diamond in her chest. Her baby was due in a matter of weeks. The birth would be her signal. It would make her child the living heir. It would unlock the full power of the sterling trust, and then the ghost would return, not as a victim, but as a queen ready to checkmate the king. The New York autumn was in full swing, and Damien Thorn's life was a whirlwind of champagne public appearances and audacious spending. He and Isabella had become the city's most talked-about couple. He was the resilient billionaire who had found love after tragedy. She was the stunning, enigmatic woman who had healed his broken heart. They were a tabloid editor's dream. Their life in the penthouse was a spectacle of defiance. Isabella, with Damien's enthusiastic approval, had begun a complete redecoration. Saraphina's classic, understated elegance was ripped out and replaced with a cold, minimalist aesthetic, all chrome, black leather, and sharp angles. It was a deliberate, brutal erasure of the past. The art collection, which Saraphina had curated with her grandfather over years, was the first thing to go. A Picasso, a Monet, and a dozen other masterpieces were quietly sold off through a private auction house in Geneva. The proceeds, over $200 million, flowed directly into the over-leveraged accounts of Thorn Industries. Damien was using Saraphina's old money stability to prop up his new money house of cards. His company was burning through cash at an alarming rate, and the infusion of Saraphina's liquidated assets was like a life-saving transfusion. He felt invincible, untouchable. He and Isabella hosted a lavish gala at the penthouse, a celebration of life that was thinly veiled as their official coming-out party. To new beginnings. Damien toasted, raising his glass, his arm wrapped possessively around Isabella's waist. The crowd of investors, socialites, and media personalities roared their approval. Across the room, a financial reporter for the Wall Street Journal, a tenacious woman named Chloe Evans, watched the scene with a cynical eye. She had received a series of anonymous, encrypted emails over the past month. The first few were vague, pointing her toward Thorn Industries' debt structure. The more recent ones were surgically precise, hinting at the rapid liquidation of assets belonging to the late Saraphina Sterling and questioning the timing of the sales. The tipster, who signed off only as Winter, was professional, knowledgeable, and clearly had an axe to grind. Watching Damien and Isabella now, Chloe felt the pieces click into place. This wasn't a story of grief and recovery. It was a story of opportunism. Meanwhile, Damien's sense of invincibility was beginning to fray at the edges. The quiet warnings from Arthur Hemlock had had their intended effect. Two of his primary lenders in Frankfurt had unexpectedly shortened his credit line, demanding a higher percentage of collateral. A major institutional investor from Singapore had pulled out of a third-round funding deal, citing market volatility. These were minor setbacks, but the timing was unnerving. It was like fighting a shadow. He could feel the pressure, but he couldn't see the source. "It's Hemlock," he seethed to Isabella one night after a particularly frustrating call with his CFO. "That old fossil is poisoning the well. He's whispering in everyone's ear, casting doubt on our stability." "He's a bitter old man guarding a mausoleum," Isabella said, unconcerned, as she examined a new diamond necklace Damien had bought her. "He has no real power, just the lingering stench of old money." But Isabella had her own concerns. Julian Croft's investigation had borne fruit. He had managed through a complex web of offshore contacts to trace the flow of money from the Geneva auction house. While the bulk of it went to Thorn Industries, a significant 7-figure sum had been diverted to a numbered account in the Cayman Islands, an account linked to Isabella's Shell Corporation. She was building her own lifeboat, skimming from the salvage operation. Damien, blinded by arrogance and his belief in her loyalty, saw nothing. The pressure on Damien was mounting. To calm his nervous investors and project an image of absolute strength, he decided on a bold move, a hostile takeover of a smaller rival tech firm, a company called Innovate Dynamics. It was a strategically sound move that would consolidate his market share, but it was incredibly cash-intensive. It required him to leverage everything he had, including the last of Saraphina's liquid assets. He was pushing all his chips to the center of the table. In Vermont, Saraphina watched the news of the hostile takeover bid on her encrypted laptop. It was the moment she had been waiting for. The arrogance, the overreach. He was making himself vulnerable. "He's exposed," she said to Julian over their secure line. "He's drained his reserves and is relying on investor confidence to fund this takeover. If that confidence wavers, he's finished." "Chloe Evans at the Journal is ready to publish," Julian replied. "Her article questions the ethics of using your estate to fund his corporate raiding, especially so soon after your death. It's going to cause a stir." "A stir isn't enough," Saraphina said, a new hardness in her voice. Her due date was just a week away. The time for subtlety was over. "I need a firestorm. Julian, that information you found on Isabella, her past in Europe, the Cayman Islands account. It's time to use it, but don't give it to the reporter." "Then who?" Julian asked. "Give it to Damien," Saraphina said. Julian was silent for a moment, processing the sheer Machiavellian brilliance of the move. "You want to let the snakes eat each other." "He trusts her," Saraphina said. "Her betrayal will be a deeper wound than any article in the Wall Street Journal. It will distract him. It will make him paranoid. It will shatter the foundation of the new life he's built. While he's dealing with the enemy in his bed, we will strike from the outside." The plan was executed with cold precision. An anonymous high-security courier delivered a plain black file to Damien Thorne's personal office. Inside was a detailed dossier, bank statements from the Cayman account, a timeline of Isabella's previous conquests and their subsequent financial ruin, and surveillance photos of her, secretly meeting with a discreet private banker known for servicing clients who valued secrecy above all else. Damien found the file late one evening after a grueling day of negotiations for the takeover. He opened it, his curiosity piqued. As he read, his face went from confusion to disbelief, then to a mask of pure murderous rage. The numbers didn't lie. The photos were undeniable. Isabella, his partner, his creation, his pillar of support, was robbing him blind. She was just another vulture, picking at the scraps of the sterling fortune. He stormed back to the penthouse, the file clutched in his hand. He found Isabella in the master bedroom, their bedroom, laughing on the phone with someone her back to the door. She was wearing a silk robe that had once belonged to Saraphina. The sight broke something inside him. He threw the file onto the bed. "Who were you just talking to?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. Isabella turned, startled. She saw the file, then the look on his face, and her color drained. "A friend from Milan. What is this?" "This," Damien snarled, "is you, your secret life, your secret bank account. How much have you stolen from me, you treacherous bitch?" The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. The perfect couple, the united front, shattered in an instant. The house of cards, built on lies and greed, was beginning to tremble. And hundreds of miles away, in a quiet, sterile hospital room in Vermont, Saraphina, Sterling, went into labor. The storm was about to break. The birth of Charles Sterling. Thorne was quiet and anonymous. He arrived in a small private hospital in Burlington, Vermont, under the carefully constructed alias Saraphina had been using. He was healthy, strong, and had his mother's determined eyes. As Saraphina held her son for the first time, the last vestiges of her fear were replaced by a lioness's protective fury. She was no longer just fighting for herself or for her fortune. She was fighting for her child's future, his birthright, which his own father had tried to steal before he was even born. The birth certificate, issued under a false name, was useless for her purposes. But Julian Croft, ever prepared, had arranged for a discreet doctor to be present at the birth, to sign a legally binding affidavit, complete with DNA samples from both mother and child, attesting to the birth of Saraphina Sterling's living heir. The document was immediately dispatched by secure courier to Arthur Hemlock in New York. The key had been forged. It was time to unlock the fortress. Back in New York, Damien's world was imploding. The discovery of Isabella's betrayal had sent him into a paranoid spiral. Their screaming match had echoed through the penthouse, a symphony of venomous accusations and bitter denials. He had thrown her out, literally casting her and her expensive wardrobe into the hallway. But the damage was done. The trust he'd placed in her was shattered, and with it, his own sense of judgment. He had been played for a fool, not by a seasoned business rival, but by the woman who slept in his bed. The timing could not have been worse. Chloe Evans' article, "The Thorne Legacy, Grief or Greed," hit the front page of the Wall Street Journal's business section. The piece was a masterpiece of investigative journalism, meticulously researched and filled with damning innuendo. It laid out the timeline of Seraphina's death, the immediate liquidation of her assets, and the audacious funding of the Innovate Dynamics takeover. It didn't accuse Damien of murder, but it painted a deeply unflattering portrait of a man cashing in on his wife's grave. The article, combined with the quiet whispers already circulating in the financial world, had a catastrophic effect. The stock price of Thorne Industries, which had been artificially inflated by the takeover bid, began to slide. Investors already nervous started to panic. The consortium of banks funding the takeover suddenly demanded another meeting, citing the negative press and reputational risk. Damien was besieged. He was fighting a war on two fronts, a public relations nightmare and a brewing financial crisis, all while reeling from Isabella's personal treachery. He was distracted, enraged, and making mistakes. This was the moment Saraphina and Arthur Hemlock chose to strike. The first blow was a formal announcement from the Sterling Trust. Delivered to every major financial news outlet, the press release was a bombshell. It stated that, contrary to previous reports, a living heir to the sterling fortune Charles Sterling Thorne had been born to Lady Saraphina Sterling. It went on to announce that, per the Trust's charter, full control of the Sterling Consolidated Capital Management and its immense voting power in dozens of global companies was now activated and under the direction of the board, acting on behalf of the infant heir and his mother, the miraculously surviving Saraphina Sterling. The market reeled. Saraphina was alive. A baby existed. The story was more insane than anyone could have imagined. Thorne Industries' stock, already sliding, went into a free fall. The second blow was more direct, a move of devastating strategic brilliance that Saraphina had conceived herself. Innovate Dynamics. The company Damien was trying to acquire was a publicly traded entity. Over the past 2 months, using a web of shell corporations funded by the Sterling Trust's vast liquid capital, Arthur Hemlock had been quietly buying up Innovate Dynamics stock. It was a slow, methodical acquisition done in small parcels to avoid detection. The day after the press release with Thorne Industries in chaos, Arthur Hemlock made his move. The Sterling Trust announced it now held a 35% controlling stake in Innovate Dynamics. Furthermore, they were making a counteroffer to the remaining shareholders, a generous all-cash offer to buy out their shares at a premium. They weren't just blocking Damien's takeover. They were stealing the prize right from under his nose. The move was a checkmate. Damien's hostile takeover was dead. He had leveraged his company to the hilt to acquire a firm that was now in the hands of the very trust he had been trying to defraud. The bank, seeing his acquisition target vanish and his own company's stock plummeting, called in their loans. The margin calls came one after another, a cascade of financial ruin. Damien was trapped. He was in his study, the shades drawn, watching the ticker symbol for his company Thor flash red, a relentless blinking symbol of his demise. His life's work, the empire he had built, was crumbling to dust in a matter of hours. He had been so focused on stealing Saraphina's old money that he had failed to protect his own. He had been outmaneuvered, outplayed, and utterly humiliated. He had lost the trust, lost the takeover, and was about to lose his own company. And he knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone who was behind it all. It wasn't just the old man Hemlock. It was the ghost. Saraphina. She had orchestrated this from the shadows. His phone rang. It was his personal assistant, her voice trembling. "Mr. Thorne, there's an emergency video conference call being demanded by the board of directors. They're all on the line. And, sir, Arthur Hemlock is on the call. He says he's representing the company's newest and largest shareholder." Damien's blood ran cold. The Sterling Trust. While his stock was in free fall, they had been buying. They hadn't just taken his prize. They had bought up the wreckage of his own company from under him. He was no longer the king in his own castle. He was just another employee about to be fired. He smoothed his hair, straightened his tie, and walked to the conference screen. His face was a pale, tight mask of fury. He activated the camera, ready to face his board, ready to face the old man who had engineered his downfall. But the face that appeared on the main screen was not Arthur Hemlock's. It was Saraphina. She was seated in a simple, elegant chair, looking directly into the camera. She was no longer the soft, gentle woman he had married. Her eyes were filled with a cold, clear fire. She was holding their son. "Hello, Damien," she said, her voice calm and steady, echoing in the silent, ruined penthouse. "I believe we have some things to discuss." The faces of the Thorn Industries board of directors, a gallery of panicked and astonished expressions, filled the smaller windows of the video conference screen, but Damien Thorn only saw her. Saraphina, alive, radiant, and holding the son that was supposed to be his key to a billion-dollar empire, now turned into the instrument of his destruction. The penthouse, which had felt like the pinnacle of his world just days ago, now seemed like a tomb. Saraphina. He breathed the name a venomous whisper. He tried to compose himself to project an aura of a man wronged, of a husband relieved. "You're alive. Thank God. We thought you were dead. I've been through hell." A small, humorless smile touched Seraphina's lips. "No, Damien. You have been putting me through hell, and now the reckoning." Arthur Hemlock's voice, crisp and authoritative, cut in. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, allow me to clarify the current situation. Over the past 48 hours, acting on behalf of its primary beneficiary, the Sterling Trust has acquired a 51% controlling interest in Thorn Industries. As of this moment, we are the majority shareholder. My first action as the representative of this new majority is to call for an immediate vote of no confidence in the current chairman and CEO, Mr. Damien Thorn." The board members, a group of people who had revered and feared Damien for years, now looked at him like he was a liability they needed to jettison. Their loyalty was to the money, and the money had just changed hands. "This is outrageous," Damien blustered, trying to seize control. "This woman is a fugitive. She faked her own death. She is mentally unstable. On the contrary." Saraphina said, her voice cutting through his tirade. "I fled for my life, and for the life of my son." She looked down at the baby in her arms, then back at the camera, her gaze piercing. "A life you tried to end before it even began." She then systematically, and with chilling precision, dismantled him. "I have here," she said, holding up a document for the camera to see, "a full laboratory analysis of the special nutritional supplement you were so kindly preparing for me every morning. It was conducted by an independent lab at the request of my obstetrician, Dr. Evelyn Reed, who is prepared to testify. It was found to contain substances known to cause uterine distress and miscarriage. You weren't trying to nourish your child, Damien. You were trying to kill him in my womb." Gasps could be heard from the board members. Damien's face turned ashen. "Furthermore," Seraphina continued, relentless, "we have complete records of the liquidation of my personal assets, valued at over $200 million, funds that were illegally transferred following my presumed death and used to leverage your failing company." She then delivered the final personal blow. "And I know all about your co-conspirator, Isabella Rossi, or should I say Isabella Rinaldi." She looked directly at Damien, a flicker of something almost like pity in her eyes. "Did you even know her real name? We have a full accounting of the funds she was siphoning from you into her own offshore accounts. While you were plotting to steal my fortune, your partner was plotting to steal what little was left of yours. You were so blinded by greed, you couldn't see the viper in your own bed." Damien Thorn was broken. Every lie, every crime, every betrayal was being laid bare in front of the very people whose respect he had cultivated and craved. He had no allies left. His lover had betrayed him. His board was abandoning him. His wife, the woman he had dismissed as a fragile porcelain doll, had returned as an avenging goddess, wielding the power of a fortune far greater than his own. "The vote," Arthur Hemlock's voice commanded, "all in favor of the immediate removal of Damien Thorn from his positions as chairman and CEO." One by one, Hands went up on the screen. A unanimous decision. "It's over, Damien," Saraphina said, her voice softer now, but no less firm. "It's all over." The screen went dark. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Damien Thorne was publicly ousted from the company he founded. The NYPD, armed with the new evidence provided by Saraphina and Dr. Reed, opened a criminal investigation into him for attempted murder and financial fraud. Facing total ruin and a life in prison, Damien fled. But with his accounts frozen and his face plastered on every news channel, he didn't get it far. He was arrested days later, trying to board a charter flight to a non-extradition country, a pathetic, haggard version of the titan he once was. Isabella Rossi vanished. With her Cayman account exposed, she disappeared back into the European shadows, from which she came a ghost with a diminished fortune and a trail of enemies. Saraphina Sterling did not return to the penthouse. She had it sold along with all its new cold furnishings. She wanted no part of that life. She moved with her son Charles into a beautiful sunlit brownstone in a quieter part of the city. She took her rightful place at the head of the Sterling Trust, not just as a beneficiary, but as its chairwoman. And she assumed control of what was left of Thorne Industries, rebranding it and restructuring it from the ground up, transforming the toxic empire her husband had built into something new, something with integrity. She had faced the ultimate betrayal and had not only survived, but triumphed. She had reclaimed her name, her fortune, and her life. She had protected her son and secured their future. The world no longer saw her as Damien Thorne's wife or Charles Sterling's granddaughter. They saw her as Saraphina Sterling, a mother, a survivor, a queen who had taken back her kingdom. In the end, Damien Thorne's ambition became his downfall. He built a house of cards on a foundation of lies, and the queen he tried to discard came back to blow it all away. Saraphina Sterling proved that true power isn't just about wealth. It's about intelligence, resilience, and the unbreakable strength of a mother protecting her child. She didn't just survive, she rewrote the entire game. What do you think was Damien's biggest mistake? Trusting Isabella or underestimating his wife? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This story is a wild ride of drama and betrayal, and if it kept you on the edge of your seat, please show your support. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a story of epic revenge, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that are stranger than fiction. Don't miss what we have coming up next.